Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah, and you can probably already tell that I'm going to be talking about the psychology behind inclusive SEO strategies. I kind of went a bit tad heavy on the psychology side of it, so bear with me. I do promise it does link to international SEO. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a warning at the beginning. Some of the examples that I'm going to show at the end of the talk are actually taken from real content that's on the internet. Lots of you might find it funny, might think that I'm doing a little bit of a joke up here by saying, ha, 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 they've got it wrong. It's actually quite painful for the groups who this content is written about to have things that are kind of based on stereotypes and, harmful stuff. So my point here is not to make a joke about it, is kind of highlight some of the content that's out there and what we can do as marketers to make it a little bit better. And as an industry, we have so much potential. We bring people together, but as an industry, we can do a little bit better to make sure that content like I'm going to look at isn't out there. So I thought I'd start right at the very beginning with what actually is DEI. I'm not going to kind of stand here and talk about a definition that I pulled off Wikipedia or another website, but I thought this graphic by my friend Jamie is actually a really good way of showing it. In the medium of shoes, I love shoes, so this is great to get to talk about that. Equality is everyone getting a pair of shoes. Diversity is everybody getting a different type of shoe. Equity is everybody getting a shoe that fits them. Acceptance is understanding that everybody wears different shoes. And belonging is wearing the shoes that you feel comfortable in and not getting any judgment for it. So as you can see, DEI is all about making people feel included, belonging, no matter what walk of life they come from. And just a bit more of a formal thing, like diversity is all about counting heads, and inclusion is about making all of those heads count. So you're probably wondering, why am I talking about this in an international SEO track, basically? Well, this was actually one of the ideas I had for kind of naming my talk, adding a bit of an F word in there as well, and saying, how the F were some of these things ever approved? Because I'm sure you've all been online and you've seen campaigns that actually are absolutely awful, they're offensive, or even content even, and you're just like, who thought that? Who approved that? How many processes did this go through and it still got out? So yeah, this is why DEI in international SEO matters, especially when you're dealing with different cultures, different languages, and different groups of people. So I thought I'd start off with kind of the basics and the psychology behind stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. And it all comes down to one thing, categorization. So you're going to hear me talking about categorization quite a bit over this talk, so listen up, this is what I'm talking about. So people use things called mental schemas to speed up their cognitive processes. And what that means in plain English is that basically people make mental shortcuts to help them gather the information from their brain to think a little bit quicker. So for example, if you're looking at the grass, you might look, oh, the grass is green, it's outside, therefore it must be grass. If you're looking somewhere and you're like, oh, it's blue, it's up high, it must be the sky. That sort of thing. So everything is categorized, and that's how you think. But this also happens for people too, that when you're categorizing people, you do the same thing. So for example, you could see somebody, I don't know, walking down the street wearing a dress, and you're like, it must be a woman because they're wearing a dress. Or you see somebody wearing a suit on the plane, and you think, oh, they're definitely a businessman. And that's kind of where stereotyping comes from. So stereotyping is kind of the cognitive process of grouping people, categorizing them, and everything. But this leads to prejudice and something called in-group favoritism. So again, in-groups, out-groups, I'm going to be mentioning them a little bit. And in-groups is the people that you've categorized to be like you. You are in the in-group if people are like you. Then there's outgroups, which are the people that you've categorized who are different to you. So you have, for example, like cat people versus dog people, that sort of thing. And then again, once you've got the prejudice, once you've got the kind of in-group favoritism, this all leads to discrimination. Yeah, and that's not good. I'll give you an example from Northern Ireland. There was a psychologist, his name was Kent, and what he did was he looked at the troubles up in Northern Ireland and realized that people were automatically categorizing themselves and other people into Catholic versus Protestant. So he found 5 ways that people were categorizing each other, and this was based on area of residence, the school they attended, because depending on what school you went to, you could identify the area and if it was a Catholic or Protestant area. Then you have names, so the names and surnames of people. You have the appearance, so what they look like, and then you have speech. So for example, you have even little things like H versus H to tell what religion you thought somebody belonged to. Why does that matter? Well, another psychological experiment was done on preschool children, and it was done in Belfast and in Edinburgh. What they did was they got building blocks and asked the kids to play with building blocks. Sounds pretty simple, right? What they did, though, was make sure that the building blocks were of specific colors. So they had green, orange, white building blocks, and they also made sure that they had building blocks which were blue, red, and white. So they represented the Irish flag, the Union Jack. And in Edinburgh, the children played with them, they built towers, they mixed all the colours, everything that was completely normal, like you could expect to see in preschool children. In Belfast, they were building things either specifically with the Irish flag colours or specifically with the Union Jack colours. And when the psychologist asked them, like, why are you not mixing the bricks? You know, they're bricks, what are you doing? You can mix them all together and make even bigger towers. The children, 5 or 6, turned around and said, but you can't mix Catholics or Protestants. So this is where the undesirable side effects happen from categorization. So bringing this back to international SEO, I did promise that it does have a little bit of relevance to international SEO. Be aware of any biases that you have. One example that I had when I was doing an international SEO masterclass on China is somebody put their hand up at the end and they were like, but China's the home of cheap goods. How can you be sure that they like luxury goods? Stereotype, bias. Whereas if they reframe their mindset a little bit to new retail marketing techniques are much more advanced than here, they could actually take that knowledge and reframe it into something a little bit more positive. And this is as well why it's really important that you use in-country research for each of your international markets so that you basically avoid categorizing your target audience based on stereotypes that you have, and instead you're doing it on data, culture, and understanding of the other people. So, on to my first little theory that we're going to be looking at, and this is called social learning theory. This was kind of coined or thought up by this lovely man called Bandura, and he stated that people learn from one another. People learn from one another through what he calls observational learning from a very young age. So this basically means that people observe the behavior, they watch it, they see what's going on. They encode the behavior, so they remember it, and then they imitate the behavior, so they do it. There was an experiment, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Bobo doll experiment. Anyone? No? Okay, well, Bobo dolls are a really freaky thing, so I didn't put a real picture on there. But basically what psychologists did was have this giant blow-up freaky doll, and they got parents or adults to kind of interact with it. Some were really nice, some were cuddling it, some were really gentle towards it, and other people beat it up, so they were punching it, kicking it, you know, being a bit mean to the poor Bobo doll. And then they saw what the kids did after seeing this, and they realized that the kids who saw the adults beating up the Bobo doll also beat up the Bobo doll. It's not quite that simple of children are going to watch something and then it'll happen. Basically how it happens is attention, it kind of grabs their attention, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on, somebody's beating up that. It happens more than once, so they're like, okay, I'm going to retain this information, it's sticking in my brain. They reproduce it so that they do the behavior that they've seen, and then they're motivated to do it again, which is how it stays. So it could be, for example, like a child saying a racist joke and the parents laughing at it and saying, do it again, tell granny the racist joke, and then they go through, basically grow up and still do racist jokes. And again, bringing this back to international SEO. So if you're a business owner, you need to make sure that your company culture is one that's of psychological safety, so that basically none of this kind of bad behavior that you don't want people copying doesn't happen. And as individuals, we can make a little bit of a difference as well by basically not behaving in a biased way, not behaving in a way that people should imitate, and also make sure that in your company culture, in your teams, you're not rewarding biased behavior. So you're not like openly rewarding people who, say, do inappropriate things at the water cooler or make these bad jokes or something. And then the final theory that I'm going to look at is social identity theory. And again, we're back to categorization. And social identity theory is the theory that basically people categorize themselves into groups. They identify within the group. Their sense of self-worth comes from the group membership, and then they start comparing themselves to other people. So again, this is very much the us versus them kind of mindset. This was thought up by a guy called Henry Teifel, and he said that we all belong in groups, and we compare our group status in relation to others. And groups can be anything. So it could be your social class, it could be your nationality, it could be your language. So again, these all link into international SEO because you're dealing with different cultures and different languages. Religions, sports teams, anything like that, you know, if you do dancing or if you prefer swimming, if you prefer, I don't know, healthy food or unhealthy food. And you can see here kind of how it starts. So you've got the funny things like dog people versus cat people, which is cute. The memes are funny. It's a little bit of a joke. But then, like in Dublin, we've recently had all of these protests about, you know, anti-immigration, the right wing, all of that kind of thing. And it's very much us, the natives, versus them, the immigrants. And it's turned pretty nasty. So again, that's not the sort of thing that you really want. Bringing it back to international SEO. So marketing, you've probably realized, is all about marketing to different in-groups because you have your personas. You want to be talking to the people like you know them, like you're one of them. But that's a little bit of an issue because you need to make sure that you're not marketing to the in-group at the expense of the out-group. So you need to make sure that you're not doing, you know, the typical kind of us versus them. We're better because we do this. You'll be better than them. We have the potential to bring people together, so make sure that your campaigns do bring people together and don't take an us versus them route in your marketing campaigns because it will backfire. And now, for the real-life examples. I came across a blog post on the internet, and it's all about why neurodivergent individuals are at risk. Before I start, I'll say I have chose to stick to examples that kind of relate to me. So being a neurodivergent adult, also I took a look at I'm going to take a look at anti-Semitism in a minute, being Jewish. I'm not qualified to talk about, you know, troubles that, say, Black people have in the workplace. So I'm not going to touch on them, but there's plenty of examples for different other groups out there. So have that in mind. So basically what this company has done is they've done this lovely graphic, and they've written like neurodivergent peoples are at risk because they're impulsive, they're all hyperactive, they are all emotional, they have all of these sensory motor issues, and they struggle with teamwork. Those are all really harmful stereotypes. Like neurodivergency is kind of an umbrella term. It encompasses autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, plus more things. You can't have a list of symptoms that like cover everybody because they're all different, you know, diagnoses. And some people may suffer with hyperactivity, some people may be more emotional, but again, it's just like everybody in this audience. You know, everybody has their own personalities, people struggle with different things, you can't put us all into one box. And yeah, it's a bit mean. And then you can see how this leads to discrimination, because later down in the blog post, they were suggesting have a mobile phone policy so that ADHD people don't get distracted. It was mean, because like, I'm an adult. I'm quite capable of managing my own time. I know that if I get distracted by my phone, I should put it on silent, put it in my desk. Like, if a neurotypical boss came up to me and was like, oh, you're ADHD, I'm going to put in a phone policy for you so you don't get distracted, you know? Not good. Don't do it. And again, there's a phrase in the DEI world, nothing about us without us. So again, it's a bit like me only talking about issues up here that kind of relate to me as a person. It's like you have to include somebody from the group that you're writing about or that you're talking about to be able to know, like, is this relevant? Is this good? Is this offensive? Because as I said, I could not write a piece of content about I don't know, discrimination in the workplace based on skin color or based on religion, for example, being a Muslim. I'm not a Muslim. I've never lived it. I just Google it and I have no idea what's right and wrong and what you can say and what you can't say. So the first one here is ensuring the safety and well-being of students. It is a piece of content that somebody showed me. And they've written a blog post about how ABA, which stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis, ensures the well-being and safety of children. The problem is that in the autism world, ABA, not a popular subject, because ABA is mainly used on autistic children, and it's used to basically treat their autism symptoms and make them appear more neurotypical. Adults have now come forward and say, I went through ABA when I was a child, it's traumatized me, that sort of thing, and the Irish government have even condemned it and said it's against human rights to do ABA on people. So, if you actually spoke to somebody with autism on this, they would have told you, never ever have a piece of content with ABA, well-being, and safety in the same piece of content. But no, this is out there, yeah, not good. And we've talked a lot about AI a bit, so I thought I'd touch on that as well, because AI can be biased. You can't trust AI to have something that's not biased. So you've got, for example, this little thing here. You'll see the little thing in German. They went out with a campaign for It's Kristallnacht Remembrance Night. Celebrate with some crispy chicken. Don't do that. You don't want to celebrate the start of the Holocaust with crispy chicken. And it's just because somebody didn't check the automated calendar campaigns that they went out with. Also, when I went to go and have a look for the German keyword Arbeit, which means work in German, in SEMrush, it doesn't show up things like find a job. It doesn't say work from home. It shows up Arbeit macht frei, which is, I can't really call it a slogan, but what's shown on the front of the gate at Auschwitz. Then you have AI images as well. Lots of people are talking about AI images. My colleague sent this to me, who saw this advert on the internet. Lots of nice information about having different stations, having 3,035 kilometers of tracks, but the tracks lead to Auschwitz. Great. So again, don't be one of those companies. Don't have those kind of pieces of content. So this is what you can do about it. Change the way you listen. Make sure that you're listening to other people's questions and that you're taking different points of view into account. Ask appropriate questions. Now, I know that asking questions is kind of difficult, especially if you're a bit nervous talking about, asking me as an autistic person something about autism because, you might be scared that you say the wrong thing. Don't be too scared. Find somebody from that community that you trust and ask, because it's always better to ask than not ask and go out with things like that and then have a million people angry at you because of the content that you created. Shift your frame of reference so that you're more considerate of minority groups or different people that you're writing about, different countries, different cultures. Manage conflict constructively, so there are going to be times when people disagree with you and people aren't happy. Instead of, getting angry that someone disagreed with you, use it as an opportunity to learn. Take the feedback on board. Also, make sure that you're recognizing unconscious bias and stereotyping. So like we said at the beginning, have a think if you're doing your marketing strategies internationally and if they do contain any type of stereotypes or biases. Show respect for other ways of doing things. in different cultures, when you're doing international SEO, there are going to be very, very different ways of doing things. So again, respect that, take it in mind, implement it. It's going to be good for your content. Interact meaningfully with people you see it as different. So like, you may have people in your office who might seem a bit quirky. I was a weird kid growing up. I didn't know that I was autistic until I was 20. You know, don't judge them. They might not want to tell you that they're neurodivergent. They might not know that they're neurodivergent. Just be respectful to people who might be a bit different to you. Don't be judgmental, and also make sure that you're making decisions with a cultural lens, because, you know, culture is everything in international SEO, and different cultures have different ways of doing things. And remember, nothing about us without us, and that includes languages, countries, minority groups as well. And thank you.
Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.